times, it can be lonely and isolating. And this is a common experience among new arrivals. I think academics call it cultural isolation. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Australians are unfriendly. No, that's not the case at all. It's just that the rhythms of life are simply different. A byproduct of socio-economic lifestyle here in Australia. African migrants often respond to this by building their own communities. Say faith communities such as churches, cultural associations, diaspora networks. Other communities do far much better though, I think so. For instance, Indian communities are so good at this. They meet often and organize community events. They normally live in the same neighborhoods, right? They all live together. They organize it, and all of them will live in the same area. I think they do it better than any other community. Filipino communities are pretty good at this as well. So these communities become essential support systems, this as well. So these communities become essential support systems. I don't think Africans do this as well as the other communities.
Hello, my people. Today we are asking the question, are Indians better in organizing themselves in most of the hostile cities in the Western world? You know what I mean? I mean, in diaspora. As you see in that in this short video clip about one of our African brother in, I think he's in Australia, is talking about, how the Indians are better in organizing their own community, because if you live in a Western world, if you're in Africa, you move to Western world, you see how some cities are hostile, I'm not saying like like hostile in terms of like this we feel hostile to the Africans. It's just that because it's a different cultural stuff, that you're gonna face these challenges, But according to this short video, you see that our brother is insinuating that the Indians are better in organizing their own community, and they make sure they carry everybody along. So we are looking at why is African not good in organizing their own community, It's not that when you come to these big cities in the Western world, you are not gonna see where Africa are concentrated, but it's not about where they are concentrated, where they live more. It's about how they interact with one another. Those Africans that live close to one another, how they interact. You see that they don't interact well, It's not Africans that were very poor in doing that, like the guy said. But the Indians, you can give kudos to them, because one thing with Indians is that, because even in terms of organization, you need money to organize it. So you need money to be in your community. When your community gets money, when the Indians get money, it stays in their community more than when an African get money abroad. Because when you look at big cities like say London, and Africans, a lot of Africans live in London. But go to the people that are selling African food in London. You don't see, like, let's say 80% of them are not Africans selling their own food. Imagine you want to eat your African food, you want to buy your African food store. You have to go and pay money to eat to all these Asians, maybe they're from Pakistan or India or Lebanese. There's lots of them, but you see, like, you can only find like even less than 10% of Africans selling their own African food to the Africans, And but in India, like Indian communities, in the Western world, imagine if Indian person want to like have a house. Some of them have houses in abroad. If they want to do maintenance in their house, then do you know how they're gonna do it? They're not gonna give the contract to someone that's not Indian. No, they were gonna give the contract to Indian person to maintain their house, which means they get money, their money stays in their community. They invest it in their community. But if he's an African, you want to renovate his house, African will not even look for African to do that. even if Africa will charge him cheap price. No, he want to go and look for other communities. He want to throw his money or her money to other communities to do it. You know what I mean? And that's why we don't you don't see this cohesion, with the Africans, and it's not only in Europe. I think the same thing happens in Australia, in America, all this Western world, and the extension. We don't know how to organize it ourselves, and there's other stuff as well because you see sometimes the Africans, they don't even want to stay close to where the Africans, they have too much concentration on Africans because there's a lot of stuff that happens there. If we're gonna tell ourselves the truth, because when you look at the gang stuff, talk about gang members, in abroad or a city like London, you see it's more with the black communities or African communities. You know what I mean? You don't see more of this gang violence in Indian communities. They don't do violence against themselves. You know what I mean? Especially when they're outside their own country. But when you look at where the Africans live, maybe they live in a council estate, stuff like that. Their children, their black children, will be. You see all this gang violence in London or somewhere else. It's all about the black community, coming from black community, and that's why some of the Africans doesn't even want to live closer to one another because this is like infection. You know what I mean? If your child, if your child is good, another child from bad family will do what? Corrupt your child as good. That's why we can't even build anything. So our problem is vast. You know what I mean? And it's not gonna go away quickly by say like who is gonna take charge? Because for you to organize a community, you need leadership and we don't have leadership. Our families as well are not even together like Indian families. Now we see more of single mom, broken families more in African community or black community in the Western world than we see in Indian community. And once the father is not in the house, everybody suffers. You know what I mean? And the community suffers at large. So, we have this problem, and I don't know when it's going to be solved. Peace.